Hello and welcome to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined by a smaller group today. We got Jerry Cutts is not here, but Nick Carlisle, Kurt Weiler, and Bob Ferrante are. And guys, it was a busy weekend on campus. We had practice on Friday, then recruiting on Saturday, practice on Sunday and Monday, and we're gonna sit here and talk a little bit about practice on Sunday and Monday, guys, and just get your overall thoughts on the last 2 days. Obviously, if you follow the Osceola YouTube channel, you've been able to see our instant reactions to practice each day on First Impressions, which is on the Osceola YouTube channel. But guys, I thought we saw a fairly evenly contested practice on Sunday. That was not the case today, but just kind of give your comprehensive overview, and then we'll kind of drive into some guys that stood out. We're going to go over Kirk's 5 surprises and see if there's any guys that we would add to that list after an additional 2 days of practice. A couple of guys. But, Bob, I'll start with you. Just your overall thoughts on the last 2 days of practice for the Seminoles.
I don't think Monday's practice is one that the offense is going to want to remember or share with family members, friends, and family as they look forward to the 2024 season. On the flip side, the defense looks good. This is kind of a zero-sum conversation to some extent.
Yep.
I think we've seen. I'll be honest. I maybe owe Fentrell Cypress a bit of an apology. I thought I had him as the wild card among the DBs because I really wanted to see more of him last year, and he's been incredibly impressive, very consistent through 5 practices. So I think we are seeing some real positives, even though there are moments where we say, hey, drops or it just doesn't look as good or as clean as you want to see it. We have to admit at some point it's July. It's still kind of early here, but it's been good competition, I think, throughout a lot of the moments of these practices.
Yeah, and I think you're going to be hypercritical when you're watching the same team every day. And listen, you have to remember, take the quarterbacks, for example. They're throwing 100 passes a day during practice, whether it's 1-on-1, 7-on-7, or team. And there's going to be a bad pass or two, and there's going to be a PBU or interception. So I think, I do think we got to be careful not to read too much good or bad into any one thing that we see. But, I did think it was an evenly contested practice. And to Fentrell Cypress, Kurt and I were sitting over there talking today during 7-on-7. We thought that Fentrell was going to probably be the kind of player he looks like he's going to be this year, last year. And I think maybe our expectations were a little bit too high because he had been an all-ACC performer at Virginia and came in. But, Kurt, to your point this morning, boy, when you start looking after 5 days, obviously this is one where we got to be careful not to be too positive. We talked about AZ and Fentrell at the 2 corner spots and how they look to be might be the strength of the defense. We got defensive tackles, Farmer and Jackson, but that position group's looking pretty good right now.
We have some questions about the defense. I don't think we think the defense is like unassailable, but I think through five practices, you have to feel very good about especially the starting outside corners and the defensive line, kind of the top guys on the defensive line. I think have all looked like you want them to be. I mean, Fentrell looks like a different player from last year. And I think really he had found a lot of his footing by the end of the season. It felt like it was a bit of a learning curve that came from learning a new defense, learning with new teammates and how to play alongside them. He was in the field corner role because they had Renardo on the boundary, and I think there was a bit of a learning curve there. But he has just been, I mean, as good as Azaria Thomas through 5 practices, and that's saying something because Azaria has been very good, and he's a guy who we had high expectations for. I mean, both those two, some younger guys too. I think. There's been a lot to like about the secondary for sure.
Yeah, and Fentrell does seem more confident player on the other side of the field, shoulder side, and I believe that's what he played at Virginia. I mean, there's times you're going to get locked into the field side because of motions or whatever the coverage you're playing. But yeah, certainly he has been I don't know, I'm not going to say a surprise, but he certainly seems to be coming on. And then when you look at AZ, the practices he's had, he's put together 5 good back-to-back practices. Was there one thing that let's try? Listen, we're taking in information, we're watching the number of plays. It's like drinking water through a fire hose. But if you can go back to Sunday, if your mind works that way. Just what were some of your key takeaways from the Sunday practice? And Nick, I'll start with you.
Speaking of a firehouse, going all the way back to Sunday, I think Sunday was a day where there were a couple of really nice catches, especially by Kyle Morlock. That was one of the days where, we talked about Kyle, and we've been talking about Kyle for a couple of days now, but he had continued to impress. So now it's more of okay, this isn't a flash in a pan. Like, this is developing into a surprise of the fall practice type of thing for Kyle. Otherwise, drops were a problem on Sunday, and I think the receivers, especially Ja'Kai Douglas, had a much better day today in that aspect in terms of drops there. But these past two practices, both Monday and Sunday, I think we all expect the defense to be good early on, and we are certainly looking at guys like Cypress and AZ Thomas in the defensive secondary. So when we're judging how the offense is looking in 7-on and 11-on in terms of the passing offense, just trying to judge, is it more so of the defense or is it more so of the offense trying to develop along? So that's kind of what I remember about Sunday or Monday. It's how are these two sides developing together. Wide receivers had a little bit better today on Monday than they did on Sunday, but Sunday was a kind of an iffy day in that regard there.
Yeah, Bob, anything in particular stand out to you about yesterday's practice that you just whether it be a position group or a couple of players that you noticed during the course of the practice?
Yeah, I'd say Kyle Morlock for sure. In addition to running backs, I think I've been buying stock throughout the offseason. I'm still buying stock on the running backs, even though I know Pat will say be cautious because the pads, it's not all on in full. I know the running game is going to look good to some extent at this point. But man, the depth at running back is just silly, and versatile for these guys, for Florida State to have this group of guys. And the freshmen, we didn't expect to be this good, this fast in Mekhi Danzy. I think we all thought Cam Davis was going to be one of the true alpha dogs as part of the run game. I don't think I expected Mekhi to be more than a play 4 games and get that red shirt type of guy. And after a week or so, I'm thinking, well, there's a bigger role for him. Truly, I think there is. And that's a real positive. So, again, you start to see those freshmen and make those value judgments as far as what they are instead of what you see of them junior, senior year. And then how does it blend in maybe with the offense or defense?
Yeah, he had a really nice run today, and I believe it was inside drill. He bounced I don't know whether really inside or outside zone play. I really couldn't decipher that, but the end crashed in and he popped out and he took it upfield. It was a nice run. And, I'm like you, Bob. I don't know if I thought anything about, Danzy factored into the plans, but he certainly is a guy that has exceeded my expectations. And then, he looks a little bit thicker than I thought he was. When he was on his official visit, he looks like he's had a good off-season program. Kurt, are you seeing that out of Danzy?
Yeah, he got from flash physically to me from day one, even when they were just in shorts. I mean, I think you see the track guy body, and he's a guy who's going to run track 2 at Florida State, so that makes sense. He's a very good sprinter. I know a state champ or right there in the I don't remember if he won or was like right there among the best in the state last year for Florida High. Has looked the part there, and I think it's carried. I mean, yeah, he's running the ball well. I think he's a real weapon out of the backfield. There was a play yesterday in a team period where they got him paired up on a corner who I think underestimated his speed a little, and on just like a wheel route type thing out the backfield, and he got by him and caught the ball in stride, and there was no catching him. He was just gone because he has that type of speed where not many guys will be able to bring him down. I mean, or run him down. I think. I wonder where he factors in. And I think we talked to running backs coach David Johnson today. We talked to Yak, and he talked about, like, someone asked him kind of like, is there a world where you kind of have to almost expand your rotation beyond the normal, like 3, maybe 4 you'd have just because of how many good guys you have in that room who've kind of look worthy of playing time. And he definitely said, it seems like it's something they're evaluating. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches in the backfield for Florida State.
Yeah, listen, one of my takeaways from yesterday's practice was Sam Singleton. I thought he had he was a guy that had made multiple plays. It was not the only day he has flashed. And then you go to today, and to Bob's point, I'm thinking about jumping on his bandwagon because then you got Keziah Holmes, who had a very strong practice. And I don't care whether it was inside drill. He ripped off a nice run on inside drill with a nice block, but I think it was Julian Armella and Jacob Rizzi. I can't remember who was blocking for him off the top of my head, but he's looked good. And then, like you guys said, we've seen Danzy. It's hard, the guy I want to see more for is the guy we thought we'd see a lot from. I want to see more from Cam, right? So that room is deep. Now we will find out. Listen, we say we find out. We'll see more tomorrow, we think, in full pads. Now unfortunately, we don't get to see the scrimmages, so we don't get to see them really go get tackled to the ground. So you'll always have questions going into that first game about who exactly can do what. But I agree with you. That running back room, we've talked about it in the spring, had potential, but when you throw Danzy in there, and we didn't talk about Singleton very much either, if those guys are legit. Now, listen, I think Danzy's kind of baby Lawrence LT, right? I think he's kind of maybe a faster version, if you can say that, of Lawrence Toafili. He's got that same skill set. He's good out of the backfield. They're built very similarly. So I get confused sometimes. Like, one of them didn't have their number on the day. They were wearing a odd colored shirt. But I knew it was either LT or Micaiah just because of how they are built and how they run similarly. Yeah, I think that's going to be a fun position to watch. And I want to circle back to the tight ends. We talked a little bit about this on First Impression. You guys have talked about Morlock. And certainly, listen, and we're going to talk about him in Kurt Surprise. So I'll just narrow it down to what I was going to talk about was, the questions coming in were about run blocking with the tight end group, right? So they go in half line yesterday, and whether it was Kyle Morlock or Jackson West or even Brian Courtney, they all had winning or good reps, whether it were cutoff blocks or reach blocks. I all thought they accounted for themselves well. And, listen, you're going against some good players. You're going against Patrick Payton, who's played a lot of football. You're going against Aaron Hester, who has continued to come on, and his strength is in that run, taking on the run. We'll see how it goes and how it plays out. But that was something I was impressed with yesterday. And then probably I thought Darius Washington had one of his best days of practice that I can remember. He was dominant yesterday. And then Daniel Lyons on the defensive side of the ball, I thought he had the best practice I've seen him have since he's gotten here. Now, he's got to get more consistent. And as I'm having a conversation today, he's got all kind of ability. I would like to see him have KJ Sampson's motor. That was a conversation we were having today, because KJ gets after it, right? When KJ's on the field, and he's another guy that's been impressive. And then my last couple of takeaways just from both today and yesterday, really, if I'm gonna talk about the linebacker cores, I'm starting to see the linebackers make more plays in this defense. They have shown up more today in inside drill than they did the day before and the day before that. So you can see that, like we said, Riley, Murphy, and even Blake Nicholson have not spent a ton of time in this defense. Blake has been here for a year, but did not, been played mostly special teams. Only played, I think, around 100 snaps from scrimmage over the course of 12 games or 14 games last year, however you want to look at it. But you do see that group slowly starting to develop, and again, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that group goes on. And listen, the defense was pretty dominant today. They had 3 tackles for a loss in the first 3 plays of inside today, and then the offense kind of started coming fighting back. Now, the one thing I will say, I did think today the offensive line, if I had to say who had the most winning reps in pass pro, it would have been the offense in one-on-one pass pro. And then when they go to twist, stunts, and games, which is a 2-on-2 versus or 2-on-3 drill, the defense kind of got after them in that drill. But yeah, listen, I thought today I really like the way Lucas Simmons is starting to continue to develop, and we know Mike talks. Mike's one of the few head coaches I've ever really verbalized in-season development, right? And I think that Lucas Simmons is a guy that you got to be pleased with. As he continues to develop, and is he a guy that can develop and get more playing time or work his way into the rotation, whether it's right or left tackle, because I believe they're going to cross-train him at both spots. So anyway, but yeah, so I've been impressed with several guys, just individual standouts. Anybody today, guys, that you're like, that wowed you?
For me, and we talked about him this morning, but I think Ricky Knight has had a couple of really good days. And that's something that I don't think I expected to say about a defensive back that just got here. But there's been 3 days in a row where he has either had an interception or has punched a ball out in one-on-ones and 7-on-7. He's looked surprising. I don't know if I would go as far to say yet that he's been the most impressive looking defensive back freshman that came in, because obviously we haven't seen enough of him yet, especially in comparison to Lester and Bates and all those other guys. But I thought, for how long he's been on campus, I really like what I've seen from Ricky.
Yeah.
And I think he's really good in that slot corner position where he's going to be a little bit more crowded. And I'm looking forward to see, kind of what he does the rest of fall practice.
Yeah, and Bates, I can't remember if it was Friday, Nick, or Sunday, but he had a couple of reps in 7-on-7 where he looked very good. So you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is it's interesting to see, and of course, there's so much. We've talked about the potential of that particular room, given what we know about the guys that are proven, and obviously the guys that have this either great length, athletic ability, whatever it is. It's a room full of potential. So I do. What about you, Bob? Anybody stand out to you today that you just said, all right, that hadn't stood out to you before?
I don't know if it's that in particular, but I think what was it? LaWayne McCoy made a really nice grab in the back of the end zone inside. That was really, really pretty. He kind of, it's not every single day, but I think he makes enough plays to where you start to question, okay, where do the freshman receivers fit into the mix? And I think we're watching Elijah Moore carefully, watching LaWayne McCoy very carefully. I know we've fielded some questions about Hakeem Williams, and we'll get to that one, shortly too. But there's a lot of, yes, I know there were a ton of drops today. There's still enough positives there. It comes down to that dependability question. We haven't seen enough consistent dependability out of a lot of guys, but there's just so many candidates right now. I thought Ja'Kai Douglas, even though he had, I think, at least one drop, made a couple good back-to-back, receptions today. So there are some positives, I think, out of that receiver group.
Yeah, listen, I do believe right now, if you had to say who are the go-to guys in that group, I think you hit both guys. I think right now, if you had to say who's going to lead FSU in receiving, I think if you said Kyle Morlock or Ja'Kai Douglas, you might have a pretty good chance at being right, because those guys do seem to be the most consistent. We've seen flashes from other guys. We've seen, as you guys said, Hakeem, we got a question on Hakeem. We'll answer that one, but we've seen Malik flash at times. So, yeah, I do think it's a room that's in, developing in front of our eyes.
I like Benson. I like Benson. I think Benson's got the most well-rounded skill set currently in the room. I'm not saying he's a better receiver than Hakeem Williams might be in 6 months or 18 months, right? But I think right now, Benson's kind of that guy that gives you the best shot to get to maybe 35-ish receptions, some amount of yardage, some amount of touchdowns. Again, who's dependable?
He's picked up right where he left off in the spring. I mean, he had a few of the drops. He, I know, had one in the red zone. He was very mad at himself about. I think showed some visible frustration. He also, I mean, he is just so lethal over the middle of the field. He's lethal on the deep balls with that speed. You get on the ball in the middle of the field, he's always going to get you a good chunk more yards. If you just, and the quarterbacks, I think, have done a good job getting him the ball in stride, letting him use that. I think Azaria Thomas called it shiftiness the other day. That is a good word for him, because he is shifty.
And boy, does he get up to full speed fast. I mean,
yes.
Listen, he might drop one over an easy one, but he might take one to the house on the next play. You got to watch out for him. And then I'm going to say his name one time just because I like to. Jalen Lucas. I don't care. Listen, that guy continues to show up at every practice. He's not afraid to run the ball inside, guys. That's one thing I've picked up on during preseason practice. I don't think I picked up on in the spring. Of course, I wasn't paying as close attention as I am in the fall to what he's going to be to this in the spring as I am the fall. Just because I didn't know what to expect from him. But every day, man, Jalen Lucas makes a play. And I think he is one of the more consistent playmakers on this offense already 5 days into camp. And we could talk about him ad nauseum because he's so much fun to watch play football. But do you guys see that out of Jalen, that he seems to be one of the more consistent offensive weapons right now?
Yeah, I think so, especially if you want to go ahead here. I mean, I think especially when you take a look at the wider room in that running back room, And I kind of just thought of this when we were talking about it earlier. There is literally a solution for every single type of play that you would want to run with somebody in that running room. And with Jalen Lucas, you just have the ability to be a Swiss Army knife, either run straight up the middle, shift in and out in between the A gap, dump him outside, get him coming across from the slot. Then you have a tougher runner in Roy Dell. You've got a sprinter that can get to the outside of the tackle in Danzy, and you have a receiving back in Toafili. And you feel like all of that also goes into Jalen Lucas, and he could do all those things too. But you do have consistent, like, different options for everything that you want to do. And the good thing about Lucas is that he can do all of those, which is so funny because he's, to your point, Pat, he's 5'9", ducking in and out of 6'5", 6'6" offensive linemen, and that's not something that you would think.
Pat, you talked about he's not afraid of running between the lines. He wants to. I remember we talked to him in the spring. He talked about, like, I do not want to be seen as a gadget back. I want to be seen as someone who can do everything, who could be an every down back. And I mean, I think he'll get that opportunity this season. I think he'll really get that opportunity going into 2025 when Roy Dell's gone, when LT's gone, when Keziah's gone. I mean, those are three big, like, the opportunity will be there this year, and I think the opportunity could really be there next year.
Nick, just out of curiosity, how tall do you think I am? If Jalen's 5'9", how tall am I?
You're probably 6'3". You're 6'2".
Well, I'm just based on I was hoping I'd go for 6'4" on your scale.
Oh no, I mean I'm like 6'1.5", and you're like what? Maybe just a little bit taller than me?
Yeah. I was being facetious because I don't think Jalen's 5'9". That's what I was.
Well,
I was just hoping I would finally.
I see. Listen,
hoping,
it depends on what kind of shoes you're wearing.
Yes,
right?
That's true. If I wear
maybe
my
he's got stilted cleats.
If I wear my Hokas, I'm almost 6'3". That's true.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of pony this year to answer this question.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot of the two backs. There could be a world where you have two in the backfield and one in the slot. I mean, you're going to see a lot of running backs on the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're going to see at least 4 play on a fairly regular basis, and you'll see more plays than that if they get a big league. Kelly, I was going to talk about this. Is DJ's timing getting better, getting the ball out of his hand on time, better than the spring now than the summer? I would say that each of these practices has gone. He looks like he's been more consistent. Now, I don't think either quarterback had a particularly good day today on the portions of practice that I saw. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't as good as the day before. But I think that DJ is starting to look a little bit more consistent. What are your thoughts?
I think in a micro sense, just today, like DJ in that red zone area, he just seemed like he was holding on the ball a little too long, a little too indecisive. To me, that's a 1 read, 2 read. If you don't see it, scramble, throw the ball to the back of the end zone. And there was one time Norvell was just all over his butt because he didn't do just that. And it wasn't just one play. It had been stacking. It had been building towards something. You could tell Norvell was very frustrated with DJ. And I think Brock goes out there the next play, and he has to end up scrambling because he can't find an open receiver. So, yes, it's good DB coverage.
Yes.
That's a positive, right?
Yes.
But just in those tight spots where the real estate is not available to you as an offense, I think those are some of those indecisive areas where I just didn't see enough of DJ. Okay, I'm going there, or it's going out of the back of the end zone. To me, it's that's the discussion.
I don't disagree, Bob, but I think that today was more an anomaly. I think he has been quite good and quite decisive through the 4 practices before today. I think they're starting to figure out how he's going to run this offense. I think he's run some RPO stuff very well. I think he's capable in the read option. I think he's made a lot of good reads. I think today was not his best, but I do think, I'm not especially worried about that until it becomes a trend, which it has not been.
And the variable very well might be the fact that it was red zone. It was literally within 20 yards. I think now that DJ has had 4 or 5 practices, I think he looks a lot better with his decision-making when there's actual open space on the field to work with, especially being able to throw the ball down the field. If we come back tomorrow and we say, okay, today was more of an anomaly, maybe we could chalk that up to them doing definitely some more red zone stuff today than I think that they've done all fall. And maybe they do more red zone stuff tomorrow and he looks good there. It's kind of like you kind of got to wait and see.
Let me ask you this question. I think Brock is definitively the number 2 guy.
Yes.
Now, obviously, there's no quarterback controversy because Florida State released the graphic today calling DJU the best all-around college football player in the country. So there is no quarterback controversy. But do you feel better about FSU with Brock if he had to come in after 5 days of camp than you did coming out of spring practice? That would be my question to you. I, for one, do. Like, I still see some things that I really like out of Brock. And listen, I think it's probably taken a little while to get what happened in the Orange Bowl out of his head. I mean, that's a hard thing for a freshman quarterback to have to deal with. But I feel, I think there were some questions for everybody that there would be a competition for the second spot. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I've been impressed with what I've seen out of Brock. Now, you'd like to see more out of both of them. At least I would. But I think that I think I feel better if I'm an FSU fan about the depth of that room right now.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I think there have definitely been times in the past 4 or 5 days where, we're standing next to each other and we take a look at a rollout throw that Brock throws and it's right on the money. You say, oh, that's pretty good. And then there are other times obviously it's first 5 days of practice. There are going to be some up and down moments, but I think right now, if you ask me right now, let's say something happens to DJ, Brock has to go in. Am I more comfortable in the fact that he can lead this offense? I think I'd say yes.
It still, I think, is best for him if he gets this entire year to only play in garbage time and work in practice and go into next year in a QB competition. That would still, I think, be the best case scenario. But yeah, I think this offseason as a whole has made me feel better. And I think that's what you would hope and expect to see from a guy going into year 2.
Well, I think that you would like to see him get as much of his action as he could in games that are decided, but I do think that they need to get him into some critical situations if you're building for the future. And it depends on how the season plays out too, right? I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, that will have an impact on how and when to use him. But I do think he's got to get some. Listen, he played against Georgia. The kid earns the right to play, and I think based on the way he's practiced. I think you got to find out what he's got, and the way you find out what he's got is you put him in against good competition. I'm not sure putting him in at the second half of Charleston Southern or whoever it is on the back end of the schedule is the experience he needs. But I do think that they need to try to get him some reps, and we'll see what happens with it. But listen, the guy's kind of got a swagger about him. I don't know what it is, and he makes plays. He's athletic. He's fun to watch, and I do feel better about that. Than I did coming into the spring. Now, we got a question for Pete the Greek. This one, do we have a chance to be sneaky good this year, and do we play with a chip on our shoulder? I would say this. I don't think they're sneaking up on anybody.
Yeah, people are predicting 9 and 10 wins. Like, what is sneaky good if, your win total is, is it 9 or so? What is the preseason win total at right now? I can check in the app.
It's 9.5 in Vegas. Vegas Insider has Florida State's win under at 9.5. So could they be a sneaky good means could they get to 10 or more? I'd say yes. If sneaky good means 9, I don't think that. I think everybody. I think we're not going to do this now because we're going to save this for our preseason prediction show. But I do think all of us think that Florida State is. So, and listen, I'm going to broaden it. And I'm going to get some hit back from this. I think we all think they can win 8 to 11 games in some form or fashion, depending on how it. But we'll talk. But I don't think they're going to sneak up on it. Play with a shoulder. Now, I think this is the more interesting question, guys. Do they play with a chip on their shoulder? And I'm assuming that is in relation to what happened with the college football playoff. Now, I've had multiple conversations with people this summer, just sitting around. Talking, drinking beer. In the day and age where almost half the roster is new, there's almost 40. There are 40. I think there are at least 40 new players on this team, which is almost half of an 85-man roster. Do you think there's much carryover from that? Or do you think the guys that are, because their leaders are guys that return from last year's team outside of DJU, do you think they're able to sell that chip on the shoulder to everybody else?
So I don't think they have to sell. This was an interesting comment. Pat Payton talking to him at ACC kickoff. I asked him kind of like, like what have conversations like that in that regard been like this offseason? Like, how do you move past that? How do you process it? Do you talk about it as a team? And the interesting thing is there are a fair share of returners. And I think Josh Farmer at AC Kickoff said, we're still pretty pissed, I think was his quote. Like, he didn't shy away from saying it's still on the mind in some degree, which is understandable. Pat Payton said, not only like they're not having to talk about it with some of the new guys who came in, the transfers or the freshmen, have talked to them about that was wrong, what happened to y'all. We're here to help y'all make sure that you get in the playoff this year and get a chance. That I thought was interesting that they're not having to bring it up. The people who weren't on the team last year saw it and are kind of saying, like, we need to right that wrong, kind of.
I think if you're a transfer, a lot of transfers are either 1 year or 2 year. Most transfers have a chip on their shoulder because there's a reason why they've left school A to come to school B, or they're elevating themselves by coming to a school like Florida State that has playoff aspirations. So I honestly, I want all of them to have chip on their shoulders. That's the way it should be. And also what Kelly Lowry says right there, if Florida State wins the ball, they're going to win 9 games. Absolutely. Yeah. The identity of this offense, the identity of what Mike Norvell wants to do is run the ball. And that's it. That's what Florida State will do. I've said this to a couple of guys. I think we have to kind of wrap our heads around what puts DJU in the best position to help this team win. I don't think the roadmap is to have him drop back 30 times a game. It's not to have DJ be slinging it. It's to have this run game and DJ be complementary. You don't fall behind. You run the ball. You force defenses to just say that it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a long day.
Yep.
I do think there's an absolute roadmap to Florida State winning 9 to 10. Stay healthy. Use the bye weeks. Avoid the injuries. But yeah, it does look like a very successful fall is ahead of us.
Yeah, I was talking to Todd Fordham at Sunday's practice. His son Corbin was here on an unofficial visit. And if you don't know, Todd Fordham was a all-ACC offensive tackle at Florida State. He played about 13 years in the NFL. So we're sitting there watching inside drill or pass pro. I can't remember which of the two drills he was. He looked over at me and he goes, listen, this is the best FSU's been on the offensive line in years. And Todd is an old offensive lineman who coaches offensive line. So when you hear things, and he mentioned the depth and the way they play. So he really feels like that's going to be I think he feels like all of us, that's going to be the strength of this football team is that running game. So it's going to be fun to watch. And I don't know if I think the days of Florida, 2 years ago, would they be a sneaky pick? Yeah. They're back on the national scene now more than ever because of the 13-win season and everything else that's going on around the program. They're forefront on everybody's mind. And listen, I agree with Bob. If I wanted to have a chip on their shoulder just because they're playing football today or tomorrow or next week, not because of anything that happened last year. I wanted to have a chip on their shoulder because it's time to go and take care of this season. And listen, I do think I think that they'll get an initial bump of motivation maybe from that, but once you get into the season's the season and you focus on now. But listen, it's been a constant source of conversation. I mean, we're now 8 months removed from it, and it's still brought up on national television shows, our show, ACC media kickoff. So listen, if whatever works for you, right? I mean, we've seen the best quarterback of all time made up reasons to be pissed off at people, and that's Tom Brady. He always found a way to get motivated. And so anyway, yeah, but it's going to be a great set. Now, I do want to, before we close out, Kurt, you wrote an article early in the week or at the end of the first 3 days of spring practice. So it was this weekend. You named 5 camp surprises through early camp. Listen, because Holmes, I'm on board with you, buddy. And after today's practice, I'm even more on board than I have been. What are you guys' thoughts on Keziah? Just said, Kurt, I'll let you start since you wrote the story. But just what are your thoughts on Keziah? Why did you put him there?
Keziah has just blown me away. I mean, in a room with so many guys, like we talked about earlier, he's blown me away with just had the big playability. He's probably had the best big playability of maybe everyone in that room through 5 practices. He's he does it with the run. He can catch at a high level. I mean, he's a guy. I like the story of in today's college football, a guy like him who could have easily gone somewhere else and probably been more assured of a role and decided to come back here instead out of whatever reason that was. And I think you hope to see guys like that rewarded. And I think from what we see in this preseason, it's quite possible you will.
Yeah, now this would surprise me that he was on your list, and I think so. I'm going to ask you why. But yeah, Kyle Morlock. All right, so just why Kyle on this list as a surprise? Not that I disagree with you. I'm just saying I wanted the rationale behind that.
I talk about it in the story. The other four I put on there because I think they're guys who look like they're taking the next step, like in that they're going from more under the radar to like really in the conversation. Kyle, I think I put there. I think there were expectations around Kyle. He is their leader in returning receiving yards, but especially through the first three practices, and I think even really in the last two, he's been, among the best offensive players. Like he has taken his game to a level. He's it's in a way, I think we were all questioning the lack of a transfer tight end. And I think what we've seen from Kyler this year, he's been downright dominant in moments, I think has been proof of why maybe they bet on him and didn't bring in that transfer and didn't push too hard on that capacity.
But they also might have known something we didn't pay attention to. Amari Williams can play either side of the ball. Hey. And I'm not saying Amari Williams is going to help this year, but he has been a freshman. I'll put it a freshman surprise. I'm not going to say one of the five surprises. And then, so you had Jacob Rizzi, KJ Sampson, Cam Riley. So my question to you guys, Nick and Bob, and even Kurt, since we've been through 2 days of practice, if you could put two more guys, or I'm not going to, one or two guys, pick one or two. If you could put one or two guys on that list after additional 2 days of practice, who would it be?
I gotta think about this.
Yeah, I'm starting to buy Amari could be a guy who you're going to play a little bit more than the 4 games. I think I love the concept of see what a guy can do through 4 games, and then you make a decision, do you redshirt him or not? I think he might be able to sneak on the field a little bit more than 4. KJ Sampson's going to play, no doubt in my mind.
He's already on there.
Yeah, I know he's already on there. We talked about Ricky Knight. I think Ricky Knight's a guy that, again, I don't factor in too many DBs that aren't the spring enrollee types as far as being contributors year one. But we've often seen a DB later in the year, even as a freshman, they get playing time early or on special teams, and then they get a little bit more playing time later in the year. So the beauty of these rules are you don't have to be ready day one as a freshman. You can be kind of ready middle of the year, later in the year, and then the coaches say, hey, you're not a freshman anymore, or we need you, or whatever the case might be, and they just throw somebody out there.
Yeah.
If I'd written the story today, I would Mekhi Danzey'd be on the list. I think he's really blown up in the last 2 days and really put it, like I wrote it before. I think you saw the ability, but the last 2 days have been really where he's ramped it up. And honestly, I'd put him in, I guess he's in the Kyle Morlock category because he's by no means, it's not surprising that he's good, but it may be surprising how good he's been as Darius Washington. You talked about it a little earlier. It's for a guy who for a long time was kind of the Swiss Army knife who they could put everywhere. He has become a really, really good offensive tackle. I remember 2 years ago when you could play him at left tackle, but it wasn't quite ACC caliber offensive tackle yet. He is now he is a potentially, Mike Norvell talked about a potentially All-American type caliber offensive tackle. He has just been downright dominant in each of the 3 Shells practices so far.
Yeah.
I think I would take a different, just for parity's sake, I'd take a different angle to this. Guys like Ja'Kai Douglas and Fentrell Cypress, definitely not like surprises in terms of like what we know that they can do, because we know that they're talented, having seen them so consistently over the past few years. But to come in and take that next step and establish themselves as leaders in that room, Ja'Kai has just been consistently good. It's good. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's good to see no fall off there, and it's good to see that they are establishing themselves as the guys that we think they should be, especially when you compare them to who's around them. Obviously, if you're Cypress, you're lining up across from somebody that Mike Norvell thinks is going to be an All-American. To have him be on the same level as AZ, I think that speaks wonders about the work that Cypress has put in over the offseason, and same things for Ja'Kai. He's just been so consistent, and he is developing into one of the leaders in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to see how each day kind of impacts how we feel about a particular position group or a particular player. I mean, it really is, because if I had to put one on after yesterday's practice, if I had to add one, it would have been Daniel Lyons. I thought he had a really good day in inside drill, whether it was half line or full live inside drill, or then he had a good day in pass pro. So yeah, I think it's funny. And listen, I do think I still had questions about exactly how Jalen Lucas could be in this offense coming out of spring. I think you were intrigued because of all the things, the speed, the size. I mean, all of it. You didn't know how, but he is fun to watch. So, I think I might listen. In Mike's offense, we might, to Bob's point, we might see Amari Williams play, because they like to split the tight end out to the slot. He could also, if you're worried about him block, you can make him the backside tight end, where most of the responsibilities are cut off the backside, and that's an easier block than a reach block or a base running block. But yeah, so I think it's going to be fascinating to see what we think. I think we got practice Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Is that they're off Wednesday? So
they're scrimmaging Saturday night. We don't get to watch that.
All right, so Tuesday. So we'll get Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll see at least multiple practices in full pads, we think. I would imagine. Then they go to Jacksonville. So it's gonna listen. It's hard. Listen, we're sitting here last week. We're almost ready to roll into week number 2 of fall camp. Man, it's hard to believe how quickly it is coming and going by already. And listen, it was a fun weekend, a busy weekend. A lot of things going on around FSU football, and hopefully Fish and Nick and I will be back at some point tomorrow, whether it's live or taped, to talk a little bit of recruiting. We do not want to tag it on to this show right now, and hopefully we'll have Charles Fishbein with us. But there were some impressive visitors on campus this weekend, including Josh Petty, and Nick and I will come back tomorrow, hopefully with Fish, and share our thoughts on what we saw at camp, what we heard from the prospects themselves. But certainly appreciate you turning in to watch the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. It'll take you to the same place. And check us out. We've got a lot of free content. We got some content behind the paywall. We think you'll enjoy the coverage of Florida State. We are 5 deep at practice every day. So we will have plenty of practice reports. And then, of course, as Nick just put up, the subscribe button.
I was early this time, a little bit early.
I like it, Nick. I like it. Keeping me moving towards the end. But yeah, so if you're not an Osceola, if you don't subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button, sign up for notifications so that you get alerted to when we're doing either shows that are live or taped. And right now, our schedule will be Seminole Sidelines on Mondays at 6 p.m. The reason for that time frame is that we're going to talk about the previous weekend's game leading into the Mike Norvell show. We'll have had time to go to Mike's press conference on Mondays, come back and share with you what he and the rest of the coaches and players said about that previous Saturday's games. And then right now we will have live shows on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. And we'll work in a Reeling Them In recruiting report around those or into those. But please subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel and to the Osceola.com. And we appreciate you watching. And we will be back on Wednesday with Seminole Sidelines.